Divorced men. What crushed her when she realized you were truly done? Story 1. My ex was always sure I'd come back. Even during the divorce, she'd say, "You're just angry now. You'll calm down. We have one daughter, 7. For a long time after I moved out, I was still doing emotional labor for my ex, answering late messages, reassuring her about money, picking up extra days with our kids so she could find herself. Therapy made me realize I was keeping one foot in a burning house, so I stopped. I went low contact. Strictly kid-related texts. No "how are you?" No reacting to her stories, no fixing her crises. I got into the gym, focused on work, and got actually happy. The moment that crushed her was stupidly small. I was dropping our daughter off. My ex lingered at the door, clearly fishing. Her, "You look different. In a good way. Are you seeing someone?" Me. "Yeah," silence. Our daughter runs out of the car, grabs my girlfriend's hand and yells, "Bye, Dad. Bye, Anna. See you Friday." My ex's face just fell. She looked from my kid to my girlfriend like she'd been punched. Her, "She calls her Anna?" Me. "That's her name." No explanation. No apology speech. No. "Maybe one day we'll try again." I just smiled at my daughter, buckled her in, and left. That was the first time my ex didn't try to argue. Later, she sent one long text. "I always thought I still had time." I replied, "Please keep communication about our daughter only. She hasn't brought up us since." That's what crushed her. Not that I moved on, but that I finally meant it. Story 2. Our "we need closure" coffee was her idea. 9 months post-divorce, custody settled, house sold. I almost said no. My therapist said, "Go if you're truly neutral. If you're hoping for anything, don't." So I checked in with myself and realized I wasn't angry, just done. So I went. She showed up in the same perfume she wore on our first date. Makeup perfect. Nervous giggle. I could tell she expected tears. Maybe a confession that I still loved her. Something cinematic. Instead, it felt like a business meeting. She started with nostalgia. "Remember when we used to come here on Sundays?" "Yeah," I said, and went back to my coffee. No smile, no hostility, just indifference. Then she shifted gears. Her, "I regret how I handled everything. I thought you'd fight for me more." Me, "You asked for the divorce. You moved out. What exactly was I supposed to fight for?" She blinked like no one had said that to her out loud. Then came the line that broke her. Her, "But would you ever consider trying again? Like, in the future?" Past me would have panicked, over-explained, left that door half open. This time I didn't. Me, "No. I genuinely wish you well, but that part of my life is over." You could see it hit. She didn't cry dramatically, she just deflated. Looked down at her hands for a long time. On the way out, she tried to hug me. I stepped back and offered a handshake instead. "Take care of yourself," I said. Later, she texted, "I thought you were just hurt. I never thought you'd be okay without me." That's what crushed her. Realizing I was finally okay, and she was no longer the center of my story. Story 3. My ex cheated, moved straight in with the guy, then tried to keep me on emotional standby. Middle of the night calls. "No one knows me like you." All that garbage. At first I answered, because 10 years of marriage doesn't just switch off. Then, during one 2 a.m. call where she sobbed about how he doesn't understand me, I caught myself comforting her while sitting alone in the dark of the apartment she'd left me in. That was my breaking point. I went no contact except for legal stuff. Lawyer only. Blocked her everywhere else. I ate alone, healed, met someone kind. Eventually remarried. The crushing moment for her came 2 years later, after everything was final. She somehow kept my old number in her head and tried calling from a new phone, clearly expecting it to still reach safe, familiar me. I answered because I didn't recognize the number. Her, "Hey, it's me." Silence on my side. I was literally in the baby aisle with my pregnant wife comparing diapers. Me, "Why are you calling?" Her, "I just needed to hear your voice. I made a mistake. Can we talk? Maybe meet?" I left him. I've changed. I looked at my wife picking out a tiny onesie, completely unaware. Me, "I'm married. We're expecting. There's nothing for us to talk about." Dead quiet. Then this small, shaky laugh. Her, "You actually moved on?" Me, "I told you I would. You just didn't believe me." She started crying, saying she thought I'd wait until she figured things out. I hung up. Then I blocked that number too. Later she emailed. My lawyer forwarded it. "I always believed you'd still love me enough to take me back if everything fell apart. Realizing you're building the life we planned with someone else hurt more than the divorce." That was it. Not my anger. Not revenge. Just the fact that when her world collapsed, mine didn't include her anymore. Story 4. We share 50-50 custody and one family group chat for logistics. That's it. No flirting, No memes, no good night. At first, she constantly tried to drag emotions back in. Photos of their old restaurant. Long paragraphs about how no one will ever understand us like we do, even though she's the one who blew up the marriage. I ignored everything that wasn't about our son. The moment she realized I was truly done happened at parent-teacher conference. We both showed up. I was on time. She was late and flustered like always. She did that thing where she touched my arm and whispered, "We still make a good team, don't we?" Before I could answer, our son looked up from his seat between us and said, very matter-of-fact, "Mom, Dad and I are a team. You're your own team." She froze. I just squeezed his shoulder and said, "Yeah, buddy. We're all okay." Walking out, she tried again. "Do you ever miss us?" Me. "I miss the family I thought we were. But I'm not trying to get it back. I'm focused on being a good dad now." I watched the hope leave her eyes in real time. She'd always assumed if she cried hard enough and said the right words, I'd chase the fantasy with her one more time. That night, she sent the shortest message she's ever written. Got it. From now on, only kid stuff. She finally understood there was nothing to manipulate anymore. I'd stopped being her safety net and just become our son's father. Story 5. The thing that crushed my ex wasn't some big speech. It was a wedding invite she didn't get. We'd been divorced 3 years. She left because she was meant for something bigger, which apparently included a coworker who promised her travel and freedom. I went quiet, rebuilt, started a small business. She followed me on every platform, always supporting from a distance with likes and comments, like she was still part of my story. When I started dating my now fiancé, I hid it from social media at first. I wanted it to be ours, not content. My ex clearly assumed that because she didn't see anything online, there was nothing serious. Then my fiancé posted one picture, just our hands, rings visible, caption, "He asked." I said yes. My ex didn't see it from me. She saw it because her best friend was tagged in the congratulations. Suddenly, all her mutuals were commenting and reposting. She was the last one to know. She texted, "So you're engaged?" Me. Yes. Her. "Everyone knew but me?" Me. "It wasn't about you." That was the knife twist. For years, she'd centered herself in my life even in absentia, like we were just on a long, dramatic break. Realizing she was now just another person on the outside of my story broke her. She sent one more message. "I always thought if I really needed you, you'd still be there." I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, but because it was finally true. I wasn't hers anymore. And knowing that she no longer had an emotional key to a door she took for granted, is what truly crushed her. Story 6. The thing that crushed my ex wasn't some big betrayal on my part. It was a cardboard box. After the divorce, she left half her life in my apartment. Because it's too painful to sort through right now. Photos, hoodies, little souvenirs from trips. I kept them on a top shelf for over a year, because some part of me still believed she'd come back and we'd unpack them together. Then one Saturday I woke up, looked at that shelf and felt nothing. No sting, no nostalgia, just clutter. I bought a box, folded everything neatly, labeled it with her name and the date. When she came to drop off our son, I carried it down to the car. Her. "What's that?" Me. "Your stuff." I'm clearing space. You would have thought I handed her divorce papers all over again. Her. "You're throwing me out?" Me. "We've been done for a year. I don't want to live in a museum." She tried to joke. "Wow, guess you really moved on, huh?" Our son piped up from the back seat. "Dad's room looks so big now. We're gonna build a Lego city where Mom's boxes used to be." I saw it hit her. She wasn't just on a break. She was a box being moved out to make room for a life that didn't include her. She hugged the cardboard like it was fragile. Later, she texted, "I always thought my things meant something to you." I answered, "They did." Past tense. That's what crushed her. Realizing she'd become an old chapter I'd finally closed, and not the unfinished story she thought I was waiting to resume. Story 7. My ex was convinced my silence was an act. "You're just being stubborn. You've always forgiven me before." She said that during mediation like it was a fact. She used to weaponize crying. Fights ended when she sobbed. I comforted her, and we never actually fixed anything. So when she cheated and then begged for one last chance, she pulled the same routine. I couldn't do it anymore. I filed anyway. The crushing moment happened months after the divorce, when the consequences finally sank in. She showed up early to a custody exchange, mascara already loading for battle. Her. "Can we talk inside?" "Just 5 minutes. I've been working on myself. Therapy. Journaling." I realized why I did what I did. Past me would have melted at therapy and realized. Instead, I opened the trunk, grabbed our daughter's backpack, and handed it over on the doorstep. Me. "I'm glad you're working on yourself. That's good for you and for our kid. But there's nothing between us to fix." She panicked. "So, what, you're just done?" Like it all meant nothing? Me. It meant a lot. That's why I left when you showed me who you are. She went quiet in that scary way where she's thinking, not reacting. Then our daughter came running out. Dad, are you staying for dinner? Before I could speak, my ex said, voice cracking, No. Dad has his own home now, remember? She looked at me like she wanted me to contradict her. I didn't. I just kissed my kid's forehead and said, Text me if you need anything for school. No, I miss you. No, maybe someday. Later that night, she sent one sentence. I thought if I became the woman you always wanted, you'd still be there. What crushed her was realizing she finally did the work, but the person she did it for had already left the room. Story 8. We spent our whole marriage with me as her emergency contact. Panic attacks, car issues, bad days at work. My phone was the one that rang. Even after she left, some part of her still believed that if everything truly went wrong, I'd come running. A year after the divorce, she had a health scare. Nothing life-threatening, but scary enough that she went to the ER. I found out 2 days later, at pickup. She was pale, wristband still on. Her, I ended up in the hospital. Me, are you okay? Her, I'm fine now. They did tests. I thought you'd come. I was confused. Why would I come? She looked hurt. Because you're my person. You've always been my person. And there it was. The assumption she'd never let go of. I took a breath. Me, I'm the father of your child. That's where my responsibility ends. I'm not your husband anymore. Who did you put as your emergency contact? She swallowed. My sister. But I kept waiting for you to show up anyway. I nodded. I'm glad you weren't alone. That's what matters. No guilt spiral. No, I'm so sorry I wasn't there. Just calm, factual boundaries. Later that week, she texted a long paragraph about how she'd realized, lying in that hospital bed, that the one person she expected to burst through the door didn't even know she was there. At the end, she wrote, I think that's when it hit me you're really gone. You didn't feel it. You weren't pulled to me anymore. What crushed her wasn't the hospital. It was understanding that her automatic, he'll save me reflex had expired, and I'd quietly moved out of that role without making a scene. Story 9. My ex left me for her soulmate, then spent the next 2 years using me as her emotional complaint box, whenever soulmate acted like a regular flawed human. Every time they fought, she'd call, You were never like this. I didn't realize how good I had it. At first it stung, but secretly felt validating. Then it just became pathetic. I was being used to regulate her guilt while she stayed with him. The day she realized I was truly done, she called after a massive blow-up with him. I only picked up because I was expecting a work call. Her. He moved out. I'm done with him. I finally see everything clearly. I want my family back. I was sitting on my couch, half-assembled IKEA crib in front of me. My girlfriend, very pregnant, was in the other room humming to herself. Me. We don't have a family, we have a custody agreement. She barreled on like she hadn't heard me. I can change. I know I hurt you, but we can start over. For our son, I cut her off. Don't use him as a bargaining chip. He's the reason I won't go back. That shut her up. I continued. He deserves parents who don't treat people like backup plans. You chose him. Then you chose staying with him. I chose leaving that circus. I'm not stepping back in because your plan A collapsed. There was this tiny, strangled sound on the other end. Her, you're seeing someone, aren't you? Me. Yes. And she's having my child. This conversation is inappropriate. She started sobbing then. Not the dramatic movie sobs, but those ugly, helpless ones when reality finally catches up. Later, she sent a text. I always thought if everything blew up, I could just go back to where you were waiting. Realizing you're gone and I'm the only one standing in the ashes, that hurts more than losing him. What crushed her was seeing that the safety net she assumed was under her choices wasn't there. Just empty air she'd jumped into herself. Story 10. Our friend group used to joke that we were endgame. Even after the divorce, people would say weird things like, You two will find your way back. You're that couple. My ex ate that up. She turned it into a narrative. We were just in a rough chapter. Fast forward 2 years. A mutual friend got married and invited both of us. I almost didn't go, but I knew skipping every event forever would just give her more drama to spin. So I went with my new partner. The ceremony was beautiful. My ex watched me from across the aisle, eyes glued to every tiny interaction. My hand on my girlfriend's back, the way I whispered jokes to her during the vows, how she laughed with my friends. You could feel the tension. At the reception, my ex finally cornered me at the bar. Her. So, this is serious? Me. Yeah, it is. She forced a smile. I'm happy for you. I just said, thanks, and turned back to my girlfriend, who was waving me over to the dance floor. We danced, we laughed, we left a little early because we were tired and happy and didn't feel the need to prove anything. What I didn't see but heard about later, after we left, she broke. One of our friends told me she went outside, sat on the curb in her dress and cried. Not because I was with someone else. She knew that already from social media. She cried because of one small detail. When we said goodbye, I hugged the bride, hugged the groom, shook my ex's hand like she was any other guest and said, "Drive safe, that's all." No private joke, no lingering look, nothing that said, "maybe someday," just the polite distance you give someone who's firmly in your past. Our mutual friend texted me the next day. "I think last night she finally got it. You're not her endgame anymore. You're just done." And that's what crushed her. Not the new girlfriend, not the ring talk, but realizing the entire love story she'd been keeping alive in her head had already ended for me. Quietly, a long time ago. Story 11. During the marriage, my ex loved playing the victim with mutual friends. After she cheated and left, I stayed quiet because I didn't want to start a war. So half our circle believed some version of "we just grew apart," or "he stopped trying." For a while, I let it slide. I still cared what she thought of me, even as my ex. I didn't want to hurt her reputation. That changed at a cookout a year later. A mutual friend's backyard, kids running around, beer in red cups. I showed up with my new girlfriend. My ex came alone. You could feel the gossip simmering. At one point, my ex loudly joked to the group, "Well, you know how he is. Emotionally distant, runs away when things get hard. Some things never change, right?" Everyone looked at me. Old me would have laughed it off, tried to smooth things over. This time I was just tired. So I put my drink down and said calmly, "That's not what happened, and I'm done letting you tell that story." You could hear the air shift. She blinked. Her. "Wow, okay? I was just joking." Me. "You cheated. You moved out. You told me I was holding you back from your real life. That's why the marriage ended. If you want to talk about what actually happened, we can. If not, keep me out of your narrative." Silence. One of our friends quietly went, "Wait, you cheated?" Directed at her, not me. Her face went red. She tried to laugh, then realized no one was laughing with her. She looked at me like I'd stabbed her. Later that night, she texted, "You used to protect me. Why would you humiliate me like that?" I replied, "I'm done protecting a version of the story that hurts me and helps you." That was the last time. That's what crushed her. Not being exposed, but realizing the man who once shielded her from every consequence now refused to cover for her even socially. The shield was gone, and with it, any hope that I was still on her side. Story 12. Money was always her soft spot. During the divorce, I agreed to more alimony than my lawyer thought was smart because I didn't want to fight anymore. She took that as proof I still loved her. "You'd never let me struggle," she said, smug, signing the papers. For the first year, anytime she overspent, she'd call crying and I'd offer extra help. "It's for the kids," she'd say, knowing it would hook me. It took me a long time to realize I was basically funding her refusal to budget. Then my company downsized. I kept my job but lost quarterly bonuses. I sat down with my lawyer, renegotiated, and went back to court to get the support lowered to what was actually in the agreement instead of the temporary extra I'd been sending. At the hearing, she showed up confident, like this was some silly misunderstanding I'd backpedal on once I saw her upset. She cried in the hallway beforehand, tried to grab my hand. Her. "You're really going to do this to me?" Me. "I'm going to follow the agreement we both signed. That's all." She pushed harder. "I thought you weren't that guy? The kind who nickel and dimes his ex." I looked her in the eye. "I'm the kind of guy who stops paying extra for someone who treats him like a villain and a piggy bank at the same time." In the courtroom, the judge sided with the original numbers. It wasn't a dramatic scene, no gavel slam, just a dry confirmation. "From now on, payments will be reduced to..." I watched her shoulders slump. For the first time, she didn't look angry. She looked shocked. Afterward, she followed me out. Her. "So that's it? You're just done caring if I'm okay?" Me. "I care that our kids are okay. That's why I obey the order. Your lifestyle is your responsibility now." That was the moment. She realized I wasn't her unconditional safety net anymore. No hidden wallet, no last-minute rescue. Just what was written on paper and nothing extra. That's what crushed her. Understanding that my generosity left with my feelings. Story 13. We used to share a playlist. Cheesy, I know. Songs from trips, inside jokes, our first dance, all of it. She kept following my Spotify after the divorce, watching every new list I made like it was a diary she still had permission to read. For a while, I left it. I was too busy putting my life back together to worry about digital crumbs. But I noticed she'd still DM me lyrics like bait. "Remember this?" With a screenshot of some love song we used to blast in the car. The moment she realized I was really done happened over something as dumb as a song. I was on a road trip with my new partner. Long highway, windows down, music loud. Our song came on. The one that used to be ours, in my marriage. Instinctively, my hand went toward the skip button and stopped. I listened. And instead of feeling gutted, I thought, this is a good song. I'm not going to let her own it forever. That night, in the hotel, I opened the old playlist we made together and quietly deleted every track from my account. Then I blocked her from seeing my profile entirely. She noticed fast. Next day, she messaged from another platform. Wow, you blocked me on Spotify? Really? That playlist was part of us. I answered, there is no us. It's just me now. And I'm allowed to decide who gets access to my life. Even the songs. Her reply was immediate, frantic. I kept checking what you were listening to because it made me feel like I still knew you. Like we weren't completely over. You didn't have to take that away too. I didn't respond. What crushed her wasn't the block itself. It was realizing how far gone I was that I'd rather listen to the same songs under a new meaning than let her keep using my life as background noise. She finally understood there were parts of me she'd never have a window into again. Story 14. I used to be her emotional janitor. Anytime something broke in her life, I cleaned it up. Bad job interview? I rewrote her resume. Fight with her mom? I called to smooth things over. Tire blowout? I drove 45 minutes at midnight. After she walked out, she still tried to keep that version of me alive. For months, she called whenever something big went wrong, ignoring the fact that she'd chosen to live that big life without me. The moment it broke for her was during a storm. Literal one. We had this massive thunderstorm, power outages across the city. I was out of town on a small cabin trip with friends, off-grid, phone on low power mode. When I came back into service, I had 8 missed calls and a wall of texts from her. Power's out. I'm scared. My phone's dying. Why aren't you answering? Wow. I see where we stand. Mixed in with frantic ones about trees hitting the building, sirens, her being alone. Old me would have called back immediately, apologized for not being available, reassured her like always. Instead, I checked the timestamp, saw they were from the night before, and texted, "Are you and our daughter safe?" She replied instantly, "We're fine. It's over now. But I needed you last night and you ignored me. I was out of town. And I'm not your emergency contact anymore. Did you call building maintenance? Your family? 911 if you needed to?" She typed, deleted, typed again. Then, "I didn't think of anyone else. I just kept calling you. I thought you'd feel that I needed you." I answered, "We're divorced. I care that our kid is safe. I'm not your first call in a crisis anymore. You have to build your own circle now." There was a long pause before she sent, "I think that's what hurts. I realized in that moment you weren't mine to call on anymore. And you weren't sitting somewhere worrying about me." That storm didn't break anything physical for her. It just made her see that the person she expected to show up in the rain was already dry somewhere else, living a different life. Story 15. The wedding album sat in my closet for 2 years after she left. Massive, leather-bound, expensive as hell. She refused to take it when she moved out. "It'll just make me cry," she said. For a long time, I couldn't touch it either. It was like a bomb. Open it, and I'd lose hours to what-ifs, and we looked so happy. So it stayed there. This heavy reminder of a life that didn't exist. Then one day I was packing to move to a new place with my girlfriend. We were labeling boxes together, laughing, debating where the couch would go. I opened the closet, saw the album, and realized I was about to carry a book of lies into a home we were building from scratch. So I didn't. I put it in a grocery bag and took it with me to the next custody exchange. She showed up, hair messy, clearly expecting the usual drop-off routine. I handed her the bag. Her. "What's this?" Me. "Our wedding album." "It doesn't belong in my house anymore." She looked genuinely confused. "Why not just keep it?" "For our son. For memories." I shrugged. "I don't want our son to think that's what love looks like. If you want it, you take it. If you don't, toss it. But I'm not storing it." She opened the bag, saw the cover, and went weirdly quiet. She ran her fingers over the date embossed in gold. Her. "These are our photos. Our day." Me. "It was a day we promised things we didn't keep. I'm not hanging on to proof of that." Our son tugged at my sleeve. "Dad, can we go? You promised we'd make tacos." I smiled at him. "Yeah, bud. Let's go." No lingering look at her. No hesitation about leaving the album in her hands. Just turning away and walking to my car with my kid, talking about toppings. That night, she sent a long message that boiled down to one sentence. "I thought some part of you would always treasure that day, no matter what I did. Seeing you hand it back like it was just a heavy book? That broke me." What crushed her was realizing the altar she'd kept in her head, where I still worshipped our special day, had been dismantled without ceremony. All that weight she thought those memories still had for me? Gone. Story 16. My ex loved my last name more than she ever loved me. She bragged about it constantly. Mrs. X sounds so classy. Your last name looks great on business cards, etc. Even after the divorce, she kept it for the kids. And because changing documents is exhausting, I didn't fight it. Honestly, I didn't care what she called herself as long as she left me alone. Then, a couple of years later, I was filling out paperwork to refinance my mortgage. The banker asked if I'd ever considered legally changing my name back to my original one before I'd Americanized it for her family. It started as a joke, but it stuck in my head. That night, I looked at the name on my driver's license and realized it felt like wearing a shirt that didn't fit anymore. It was the name I'd twisted myself into to be easier for her parents, her colleagues, her world. So I went to court and changed it back to my birth name. A month later, she found out when our daughter brought home a school form. "Mom, why does Dad have a different last name now?" My ex texted me instantly. "What is this? You changed our name? You didn't even tell me?" Me. "I changed my name. You can keep it if you want, but it doesn't belong to us anymore." "Just you," she called, furious, voice cracking underneath it. "So I'm just walking around with a name that means nothing to you now?" I said. "It means I used to be married." "That's it." She went quiet. Later, she messaged, "I thought you'd always be Mr. X in some way, even if we weren't together." Seeing you erase that without looking back, that hurt more than signing the divorce papers. That's what crushed her. Realizing I didn't just leave the relationship, I left the version of myself that existed only for her. Story 17. My ex always kept one foot in my family even after she left. She still texted my mom on holidays, sent birthday messages to my sisters, liked their Facebook posts like she was still the golden daughter-in-law. My family stayed polite to keep the peace for my sake and our kids. Then my dad got sick. Hospital, tests, the whole terrifying roller coaster. While I was juggling appointments, work, and kids, she suddenly started hovering again, asking for updates, offering to come support at the hospital, acting like she was still part of the inner circle. When Dad's condition stabilized, my mom decided to have a small family dinner, just immediate relatives and partners. My ex somehow found out and texted me, "So, what time should I come by?" "I'll bring dessert." I stared at the message for a minute before replying, "You're not invited. It's family only." She answered instantly, "I am family. I was there before your girlfriend. Your parents called me their daughter." Me. "You were family. You left. They're being civil for the kids, but you don't get access to family events anymore." She showed up anyway, dressed up, holding a cake, standing on the porch like nothing had changed. My mom opened the door, stepped outside, and gently said, "This is a family night, honey. We'll see you at the next school thing, okay?" The door closed. She was left on the porch holding this stupid cake. She texted me later, "Your mom chose her over me?" I replied, "My mom chose boundaries." "I did too." She wrote back, "I always thought no matter what happened between us, your family and I would still be us." Realizing I'm just someone they're polite to now actually broke me. That's when it crushed her. Seeing she hadn't just lost me, she'd lost the entire place she'd claimed in my world. Story 18. The house was her dream more than mine. Big white kitchen, huge tub, fancy neighborhood. She used to say, "Even if we ever split up, I could never leave this house." Then she did. She moved out with her coworker, said she needed freedom, left me with the mortgage and the echo of her words. For a year, I lived in that mausoleum of a marriage, drowning in memories every time I opened a cabinet she'd organized. Finally, my therapist asked, "If this house didn't exist, would you choose it today?" I laughed and said no. 2 months later, the for sale sign went up. I didn't tell her. Legally, it was mine at that point. The first she saw of it was a real estate listing a friend sent her. Our old bedroom staged with new furniture, the kitchen bright and empty, no trace of her. She called me, furious. Her. "You sold our house? Without asking me?" Me. "It's my house. You chose your freedom, remember?" Her voice cracked. "But that was supposed to stay." "That was home," I answered. "Home was supposed to be us. You burned that down. The building's just wood and drywall." The real breaking point for her was move-out day. She drove by to talk, but got there late and saw the new owners already pulling up. A young couple with a baby, smiling, pointing at the windows. She watched them take a photo with the keys on the porch we used to decorate for Christmas. Later, she texted, "Watching someone else pose in front of what I thought would always be my house, and knowing you weren't even sad enough to stop it. I think that's when I realized you were really done with our life." What crushed her was understanding there was no shrine left standing. Even the walls she thought would keep a piece of us forever were gone. Story 19. My ex always believed the kids would be her trump card. "They need their mother," she'd say, whenever I tried to push back on her chaos. Translation: "You'll put up with anything because you're scared of losing time with them." After the divorce, we had 50-50 custody. She still weaponized their emotions, telling them things like, Daddy doesn't like it when you're loud. Or, Daddy's too busy with his new life. I stayed quiet publicly, documented everything privately. Then came the summer schedule talk. Our oldest, 12, was old enough that the court wanted his input. My ex was sure he'd choose more time with her. She's the fun parent on Instagram. She showed up to mediation glowing with confidence. The mediator asked him gently, if you could change anything about the schedule, what would you change? My son looked at me, then at her, and said, I want to stay more at Dad's during school weeks. It's calmer there. I can sleep. You could feel the hit. My ex jumped in immediately. Is this because your father told you to say that? Did he coach you? He shook his head. No. At Mom's, there's always yelling and people over. I get stomach aches on mom nights. The mediator wrote it down. My ex went pale. Later in the hallway, she grabbed my arm. Her. So this is your plan? Turn my own kids against me so you can play perfect dad? I pulled my arm back. I didn't say a word. They just finally said out loud what I've watched for years. That night she texted, I always thought they'd see you as distant and me as home. Hearing my own child choose your peace over my chaos, that destroyed me. What crushed her wasn't losing one extra school night. It was realizing that when I detached from her and focused solely on being a stable parent, the kids noticed and chose the version of me that no longer revolved around her. Story 20. My ex lives on social media. During our marriage, every fight, every reconciliation, every vacation was content. After the divorce, she kept posting healing journey reels with vague captions that made me look like the villain without saying my name. I said nothing. I blocked her accounts and moved on. She, however, stalked mine relentlessly, watching every story the second it went up. I could see her little profile picture pop up in the views like a ghost. When I started dating my current partner, I made a conscious choice. No soft launch, no cryptic hints. Just one normal picture months into the relationship. Us at a food truck, nothing flashy. Then I locked my account to friends only and quietly removed my ex and most of the mutuals who kept forwarding her screenshots. She found out she'd been removed when she tried to check my story and saw, you must follow this account to view their story. And then realized she no longer could. She messaged me from a burner. Did you seriously remove me? Afraid I'll find out how happy you are? I replied, I removed you because my life isn't a show for you anymore. You don't get front row seats. She went off. I checked your stories to make sure you were okay. To feel connected. To know you hadn't changed too much. Now I know nothing. Me. That's the point. We're strangers who share paperwork. Hours later, she sent a final message that read more like a confession. I could handle you being with someone else as long as I could still see it and tell myself you weren't really that different without me. Realizing I don't even have that window anymore, that's what hurts. What crushed her was losing not the relationship, but the backstage pass she assumed she'd keep forever, and seeing that the version of me she curated online died the moment I stopped letting her watch. Story 21. My ex always swore I'd never actually leave because I was too soft. She gambled on that. She checked out emotionally, flirted with coworkers, treated me like background noise while I handled bills, kids, chores. When I finally filed, she told her friends, he's overreacting. He'll cool off. Even after the divorce, she treated my boundaries like a phase. She'd send selfies before nights out. Do I look good? Or text me drunk at 1 a.m.? Remember when I stopped replying to anything that wasn't about our son? I went to therapy, got serious about my mental health, joined a men's support group. For the first time in years, I wasn't orbiting her moods. The moment that crushed her came after our son's school play. Our boy had one line, we both showed up. Afterward, he ran to me first, jumped into my arms. My girlfriend stood beside me, clapping, holding his little backpack. My ex approached, smile too bright. Her. We should grab a drink sometime, just us. For old time's sake. I miss the way we talked. Old me would have taken that bait, at least to hear her out. This time I said, I don't think that's a good idea. If you need to discuss parenting, use the app. She blinked. The app? Seriously? I'm trying to connect with you. I shifted my son on my hip. We're not a thing to connect anymore. We're co-parents. That's it. Our son looked at her and weirdly sealed it. Mom, Dad's got his own people now. Later, she texted, you sounded like you'd rehearsed that. Calm. Final. I expected anger. Or you to cave like always. Hearing you talk about us in past tense like a closed file, I think that broke me more than the divorce. What crushed her wasn't my new girlfriend. It was realizing the guy she counted on to be emotionally available forever had finally removed her access, politely and permanently. Story 22. My ex weaponized my guilt better than anyone I've ever met. Anytime I hinted at leaving during the marriage, she would say, who's going to put up with me the way you do? No one else will ever understand me, and I'd stay. After she walked out to find herself, she still used the same lines. When her situationship blew up, she called me sobbing. You're the only person who really knows me. Can we just talk? Not about us. Just be my person for one night. I almost slipped. Almost. Instead, I told her, you should book a therapist. I'm not that person anymore. Fast forward 6 months. Our mutual friend had a birthday party. I showed up late because I'd been at a group meeting for men dealing with divorce and codependency. She saw the pamphlet in my hand as I set my jacket down. Her. What's that? Me. Support group thing. It helps? She smirked. You really need a circle of guys to tell you how to feel? Our buddy overheard and said, no, it's actually been good for him. He's not the doormat he used to be. I watched that comment land. Later that night, when people were outside smoking, she cornered me in the kitchen. Her. So these strangers know more about you now than I do? Me. Yeah. They know the version of me that's finally learning to say no. She scoffed. Then her voice cracked. I always thought when I was ready I'd come back and you'd still see me. You'd still be the one who understood. I shrugged. I understand you just fine. That's why I'm done. She went quiet, really quiet, and just stared at the floor. The next day she sent, hearing you say you understand me, and that's exactly why you won't come back. That crushed me in a way I didn't see coming. What broke her wasn't me changing. It was realizing I finally saw her clearly and chose myself anyway. Story 23. The pet custody thing sounds stupid until you live it. We had a dog before kids. A rescue that slept on our bed and went on every road trip. When she left, she insisted on taking him because he loves me more. I let it go to avoid another fight. After the divorce, she used the dog as an excuse to keep me around. She'd send pictures. Look who misses his dad. Or, he whines when he hears your name, always followed by some flirty comment about how at least someone still loves you unconditionally. I missed that dog like hell, but I refused to visit because I knew exactly what she was doing. Instead, I adopted another rescue. Quiet, anxious little guy who glued himself to my side in a week. One day, my ex had an emergency shift and asked if I could watch our dog just this once. For the dog, I said yes. She dropped him off on my porch and froze when she saw my new dog padding around my feet, wagging, clearly at home. Her. You got another dog? Me. Yeah. A while ago, her eyes flicked between the two dogs, then to me. So you just replaced him? Like he meant nothing? Like we meant nothing? I knelt down, scratched both dogs behind the ears. I didn't replace anyone. I made room for something new because you took the old life with you. For the rest of the evening, our old dog followed me around like he always used to, falling asleep at my feet while I worked. My ex came to pick him up and saw it. That easy, wordless bond she'd ripped out of my life and assumed would leave a permanent hole. Later that night, I thought you'd stay stuck on losing him, the way you were stuck on losing me. Realizing you built a whole new routine, a new dog, a new life, and didn't need our dog as an excuse to see me, that really hurt. What crushed her was understanding that even the little shared things she thought would keep us tied together forever had been quietly replaced with something that didn't involve her at all. Story 24. During our separation, my ex loved to poke at me with jealousy games, posting thirst traps, tagging random guys, making sure mutual friends accidentally mentioned who she was seeing. She wanted a reaction. Angry texts, late-night calls, anything that proved I still cared. For a long time, I gave her exactly what she wanted. I'd spiral, confront her, embarrass myself. She'd say, see, you're still obsessed with me, and I'd hate myself afterward. Then my therapist gave me a line. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. I laughed it off, until I stopped laughing and actually tried it. She posted some dramatic reel one night, crying to camera about toxic men who can't handle a woman in her power. Our mutual friend told me she mentioned details that clearly pointed at me. I didn't watch it. I muted her name everywhere. Next day, she texted, guess you've seen my story. Me. Nope. Her. Well, people are talking. Don't you have anything to say? Me. No. She started throwing hooks. Wow. So you're just letting everyone think you're the bad guy? Me. People can think whatever they want. I've got work. Hours later. You really don't care what I do anymore, do you? I stared at my phone, realized I genuinely didn't, and typed back, no, I don't. I care about our kids' schedule. That's all. Weeks went by. Her posts got louder, more pointed, more obviously trying to bait me. I stayed silent. Eventually, she cracked and messaged, I tried everything to get a rise out of you. I wore the dress you loved, posted old photos, told everyone how much you hurt me, and you just lived your life. Knowing I don't have that kind of power over you anymore crushed me in a way I can't even explain. What broke her was finally seeing that all the strings she'd pulled for years were attached to nothing now. I'd quietly put the scissors down and walked away. Story 25. We used to joke that if anything happened to us, we'd still be the person the other called when life exploded. Car accident, job loss, family drama. We had an unspoken emergency pact. After she ended things, she assumed the pact stayed. I was still the first person she texted about her dad's surgery, her car breaking down, failing her certification exam. I responded at first out of habit, then out of guilt. And every time I did, I felt myself sink back into being her unpaid crisis manager. The last straw was my own emergency. I wound up in the ER with a kidney stone at 3 a.m. Morphine, IV, the whole miserable package. Lying there, I realized I hadn't even considered calling her. My phone log was my brother, my buddy, my new girlfriend, not her. Weeks later, during a handoff, I mentioned it offhand when our son asked why I'd missed a game. Dad had to go to the hospital. He's okay now. My ex whipped around. You were in the hospital? When? Why didn't you tell me? I shrugged. I was in pain. I called the people who were my people now. She looked genuinely hurt. I still check on you. I still worry. I thought if something serious happened, I'd be the first to know. I shook my head. That stopped being true the moment you left. You chose not to be my person. You don't get emergency access without the commitment. She tried to laugh it off, but her eyes were glassy. Later, I got a wall of text. I know I left, but I always thought you'd reach out if you were really scared or needed someone. Finding out you went through that and I was just some woman you co-parent with, that actually broke me. What crushed her was realizing the emergency pact she'd relied on outlived our marriage only in her head. In reality, I'd already built a different circle, and she wasn't at the center, or even in it anymore. Story 26. My ex liked to say, no matter what happens, you'll always be my best friend. She said it even while signing the divorce papers, like she'd negotiated some permanent emotional severance package. 2 years later, she got engaged to the guy she'd left me for. Fine. I genuinely didn't care beyond how it affected our daughter. Then she called one night sounding weirdly shy. Her. So, I have a crazy idea. You can say no, but will you walk me down the aisle? I thought I'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? Her. You're the only man who really knows me. My dad's useless, and it would mean so much symbolically. Like, we moved past everything. Past me would have eaten that up. Validation. Importance. Being the good ex. This time I just said, no. That's not appropriate. She laughed like I was kidding. Come on. It would show everyone there's no bad blood. Me. There isn't. But I'm not your father, your friend, or your emotional support animal. I'm your ex and our daughter's dad. She can throw petals. I'll sit in the pew like any other guest. Silence. Then, sharper. So you'd rather some random uncle do it? Me. Yes. Because it shouldn't be me. Fast forward to the wedding. Our daughter was the cutest flower girl on the planet. I sat mid-row with my girlfriend, clapped politely, stayed out of photos. Her uncle walked her down the aisle. She kept flicking her eyes toward my row like she expected some big rom-com moment. I just smiled at our kid. Later, she texted from her honeymoon. I really thought you'd say yes. I thought some part of you would want that moment with me. Watching my uncle walk me instead. Knowing you were there and chose not to, that actually hurt more than the divorce. What crushed her was realizing I'd finally stepped out of the forever best friend role she'd written for me and refused to play her emotional prop one more time. Story 27. When she left, she swore the guy was her soulmate. He's everything you're not. He makes me feel alive. Cool. 16 months later, she was alive, broke, and living in a sublet after he bailed. She called me in full meltdown mode. Her. He just walked out. After everything I sacrificed. Can you believe that? I said nothing. She took that as an invitation. For 40 minutes, she ranted about how selfish he was, how men are trash, how, at least you were loyal even if you were boring. Old me would have jumped at that, tried to outdo him morally, gently pivot the conversation into how, maybe we could try again. This time I just listened until she ran out of steam. Her. Say something. Me. Sounds like you picked someone who treats people the way you treated me. Silence. Her. Wow. So you're taking his side now? Me. I'm not on anyone's side. I'm just noticing patterns. You cheated. You left. You blew up our life because you thought you could always land somewhere soft. You found someone with the same ethics. He did to you what you did to me. That's not karma, that's math. She tried to pivot into nostalgia. But you know me better than anyone. You know I didn't mean to hurt you like that. I shrugged, even though she couldn't see it. You meant it enough to do it. I'm sorry you're hurting, but I'm not going to be the guy you cry to about the man you chose over me. She made that small choking sound people make when anger and shame collide. Later she texted, I thought you'd at least say I deserved better. Hearing you calmly say I picked exactly what I am, that shattered me. What crushed her wasn't that he left. It was that I refused to join her victim narrative and instead held up a mirror, without offering myself as the alternative.